Here we are at an elephant sanctuary in Thailand. Part of their folk culture is taking care of elephants and them being an important part of their lives. Today we're going to talk about the difference between pop and folk culture. I'm Mr. Coulter, and this is Human Geography.
We're going to kick off our study of culture in Unit 3 with an introduction to culture. 3.1 helps us understand the basics of culture that will build us through the rest of this unit. Culture comprises the shared practices, technologies, attitudes, and behaviors transmitted by society. And our key term right here is culture is the learned collective human behavior as opposed to inborn or innate behavior. So we are getting all into culture. Cultural traits are the building blocks of culture. So these are the things that add up to make an entire culture of a society. Cultural traits are the building blocks of culture. It's the smallest unit that we look at culture. Material culture are the physical objects from the culture. So you can see that here I've got cowboy boots and a hat. Those things are material culture from the U.S. West. Those are things that specifically call to that material culture of the society. Non-material culture are the ideas, the beliefs, the values, structures, and organizations of a culture. These can be things like language, education systems. The things that shape a culture together are all things that add up to non-material culture. Religions, everything we're going to get into that people have created that are not physical objects are non-material culture. Cultural traits include a lot of different things. They include things like food preferences, architecture, the way that we actually use and shape our land. All of those things go under cultural traits. So we're going to look at some specifics from different cultures around the world. Let's start with food preferences. This is ceviche. In Peru, it is a very popular dish. It is raw fish that has been soaked in acids in order to give it a good taste. And it is served cold, typically with corn, like whole shell corn and sweet potatoes, which are also popular in Peru. So the food preference of the people in Peru would include ceviche, sweet potato, and those corn kernels. Land use is another example. So in Singapore, you can see they have an entirely urban land use. The entire country is the large city plus the suburbs around it. So they have an all urban land use. That defines the culture of their country, that they are a very modern and a very urban society. Architecture helps to define places and gives senses of place to a specific place. Sometimes those architectures take from the environment around in order to make a place that reflects that environment. So you can see in Indonesia, they have very steep roofs with materials that are found in nature around them because of how much it rains. It's also raised up so you can see like the stilts underneath. So if it floods in Indonesia with a lot of rain or a hurricane, it goes under and doesn't destroy the house. So that architecture is unique to Indonesia. We see clothing as a unique thing to different cultures, and as we get into popular and folk culture, we'll understand a little better. But in Scotland, kilts are a cultural artifact that people wear to celebrate their heritage. And there's a lot that goes into kilts, along with the bag, the belts, the socks, and everything else that goes with the outfit. Music is a major part of culture. Typically now, most of you are familiar with pop music, but this is traditional folk Indian music, and these two are playing on their instruments to signify traditional Indian music. Cultural complex is when all of these different traits add up together. They become a cultural complex. So it's formed when you take the different cultural traits and they combine into a group of people's culture. That is a cultural complex. This includes common values, beliefs, behaviors, artifacts that make a group in an area distinct from others. So all of those cultural traits combine together to form a cultural complex. Below we can see two pictures of weddings in Judaism. You can see the different cultural traits that make it unique in the way they come together to make a Jewish wedding. So they are tossing the groom on a sheet in the left-hand picture. On the right-hand picture, they're breaking the glass. Both are unique cultural traits that combine to form the Jewish cultural complex. We share culture in many ways. the way that we pass down our belief systems, our practices, and cultural traits. Many times this comes from parents to children as they raise their kids. They teach them about things that they do. At school, we learn many different things about our cultures, like our languages, math systems. Anything and everything that you can get from a school is an example of culture that is passed down. Religious organizations often pass on cultural traditions, including religious practices and languages sometimes. Books and art are a good way for people to express their culture and understand others. Media like TV, movies, and radio are very modern ways of sharing culture. And then the most modern is social media and the internet are major spreaders of culture in today's times. There are a lot of differences between our cultures around the world. Many humans have made different folk and popular cultures in all different places, and it's important that as we look at it, we understand those differences and we study them through the eyes of someone who looks at it through cultural relativism. Cultural relativism and ethnocentrism are two different ways of looking at other cultures. Relativism is the principle that an individual human's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of their culture. So you can't use the lens of your culture to always examine others because that becomes more judgmental, where relativism is trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding their culture based on how they spend their lives, use their cultural traits, reflect how they live. So it's important in relativism that we are able to look and think about others' cultures from the perspective of their culture. Ethnocentrism is the opposite. Ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is superior to others, so that your nation or ethnic group is superior, meaning your culture is better than other people's culture. That is a way that in our class we're going to try to avoid thinking about it, that others are weird is not the language we want to use. We want to learn the interest in learning about other people through cultural relativism. So here are some examples, a couple of comic strips. So the chicken is saying, how do I get to the other side of the road? And the ethnocentric chicken says, you are on the other side of the road, because that chicken can only view it through their cultural lens. In this one, this is people arriving internationally and greeting each other. So one businessman is saying, what do I do now? As the other tries to hand the card. The one handing the card views it as very rude that he has not taken the card. It's a part of their cultural traits to hand a business card over. We see in the middle that the woman is leaning in to try to kiss the man on the cheek to be friendly, because that's friendly in their culture. And then the man feels like this is an invasion of personal space, that he feels uncomfortable with a kiss on the cheek. We also see the man on the right is bowing and waiting for someone else to bow back to him, and doesn't know what to do since no one has bowed. So it's important that we understand that people have these cultural traits, and we don't want to be judgmental about them. We want to try to understand and learn about them. And then finally, this is someone in a culture that does not wear hijabs, thinking that they are being helpful to someone who is wearing a hijab by pulling it off, where the person with the hijab chose to wear the hijab for their culture, and therefore is horrified that they would try to take it. So it's just an example of like trying to understand others' cultures from their point of view. That is known as relativism. So in cultures, we have taboos. Taboos are behaviors that are heavily discouraged by a culture. Many cultures have taboos against eating different types of foods. So here are examples. We've got in Japan that people are supposed to take their shoes off and put on slippers as they enter a house so that they don't track dirt or other germs in from outside. Here in a Jewish cemetery, you're not supposed to have tattoos. So if you want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, traditionally you are not supposed to have any markings on your skin. And then we see different food taboos. In the United States, we obviously think that it is wrong to eat dogs and cats since they're considered pets. But in India, it is extremely frowned upon and wrong to eat a cow. So we see the differences in the food taboos there. Also in Islam, you're not supposed to eat pork or pig because it's considered a dirty animal. So that's a food taboo in Islam, which means that most people in the Middle East don't eat pigs. So let's think about the difference between folk or local cultures from popular culture. So folk culture is localized around a small isolated group of people. It is small and homogeneous, which means it's centered around a small group of people, and those people generally have pretty much the same culture. The culture is based on local materials and traditions from a place, so it's deeply tied to that place. And you have a strong sense of place in folk cultures. You really know where you are, and you have a sense of history and tradition in these smaller cultures. Anyone watching this video is not a part of a folk culture generally, because YouTube and modern media would not be a part of folk culture. This is very specific and tied to the traditions of a local place. Local and folk cultures don't change over time. They stay the same over time in the same place. And then again, buildings are based on local materials. So we see this strong tie to place in the homes and the buildings of a folk culture. So let's look at this one. This is in Northern Europe. We see Iceland and Norway. Both Iceland and Norway have this very unique type of building that you see in the far north, where they put sod on top of the roofs of their homes in order to keep in heat or cool throughout the year. It helps to insulate the homes during terrible cold conditions. So these are very unique things that we can see that they match the landscape around them. In Western China, yurts are very common, which is a type of round tent. And you can see that it comes from the local materials. Similar to Thailand, they have the slanted roofs that help to wash water off when it rains heavily, which it does in Southeast Asia. And then the stilted floors, so it's raised up so that water can pass under without destroying the structure of the home. We also see in the clothing that people wear. These are Amish communities, which we have around the United States. Very traditional clothing. They don't use electricity in their work that they do. This is traditional Mongolian garb. You can see the unique design in Mongolian clothing. And then this is an Apache ritual, a coming-of-age ritual, where we can see the traditional clothing that was found before colonists in the United States. So popular culture is very different. Popular culture is the widespread culture of large groups. Modern media and internet have kept people more connected to popular culture than ever before. And popular culture, unlike folk culture, is not tied to place. It spreads quickly and it changes frequently over time. So where local and folk cultures stay the same, they don't change over time, and they stay in the same place, pop culture is spread widespread and it changes frequently. So thinking about popular culture, you probably dress more like someone from Canada or the UK than you dress like your parents did in the 1980s or 1990s. So it's this changing over time, but everywhere has pretty similar popular culture, where folk cultures are very different from place to place, but they don't change over time. The architecture and building materials are similar wherever you are. They are mass produced, like brick, stucco, things like that are spread everywhere, and it's hard to tell the difference between places. There's not a strong sense of place. Here are a bunch of examples of popular culture. Got the Marvel Avengers franchise, which is spread all around the world. In Thailand, I had conversations about Infinity War when we were there. You've got Taylor Swift on an iPhone, Baby Yoda, or I guess Grogu, Timothy Chalamet wearing blue jeans. Blue jeans are like the signal of Western culture in the Eastern world. Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, TikTok, Kim Kardashian, and Kanye West, and Old Town Road are all examples of popular culture that spread quickly to a lot of people, and then they change over time. So that is it for our introduction to culture. Topic 3.1, we covered pop and folk cultures. We talked about cultural traits and cultural complexes, and got into some taboos in the way that we look at other cultures. An introduction to culture is just one step into better understanding our world. I'm Mr. Coulter, and that was Human Geography.